Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Elizabeth and I run the blog lifefromtheviolasection.com, where I share my favorite practice tips, general advice, and tech for musicians. Today I wanted to show you what is in my viola case, even though I mostly just teach and work from home. Sometimes I use this thing. But really, we're gonna go over some of my favorite accessories and gear for my viola and also my violin too, because I do teach viola, violin, and piano, and a lot of my viola and violin accessories and gear are very similar, if not just the same. So let's start with my case. This is a BAM case. I got it as a high school graduation gift. Now, I don't know if BAM cases are entirely worth the money. They are very expensive. They come at a pretty high price point. But I do love mine. You know, it was a rite of passage. I was gonna go off to conservatory and I got a BAM case and I do really like it. It is really protective. The handle has still held up. I've had this for 10 years now, pretty much exactly, because I got it around the end of May in 2015. And you know, it still looks good. It might have a couple little stains, one or two here or there. I could probably clean that up if I really wanted to, but this is how it looks. And I use it as a backpack. Now, the one complaint that I do have is that one of these little strap connectors on the bottom did break. So I used, what are these, carabiners, I think? I had to add some carabiners to the bottom to keep the straps attached. That was not a fun walk across campus. So when one of these straps broke and I was just kind of like hobbling around with this in my backpack and oh, not a good day. That was also right before my orchestra, like a week before my orchestra went on tour to Argentina. And so I was like, I have to fix this fast. And carabiners really came in handy for that. Great use. So let's actually open this up and get to the accessories and gear that I love to use for my viola. So I love to put my viola in a silk instrument bag. This one is by Carmen Bruna Designs. She makes beautiful instrument accessories like instrument bags, cleaning cloths, little kind of bass bibs, things like that. And they are just wonderful, beautiful quality. I also just love this fabric. It's very metallic. Very professional looking, but also fun, kind of like sprinkles or funfetti or something. Love putting my viola in this. So if you don't know already, putting your instrument in a bag can help the temperature and humidity kind of regulate a little bit because your instrument has that extra layer of protection. And silk and satin are kind of the best materials to regulate the temperature and humidity for your instrument. So it has a nice little drawstring, and you can also tie a little bow around the instrument's neck. I don't do that all that much. Usually if I'm unpacking or packing, I'm in a little bit of a hurry. So I usually just draw the drawstring closed, make sure that it's buckled in with Velcro in the actual case, and then I zip up the case and I feel like I'm good to go. Let's talk about rosin next. So I have two rosins that I regularly use, one for my viola and one for my violin. So for the viola, I like to use the Motria Gold rosin for violin, viola, and I think even cello. I've had this one for a few years now, so it's not in perfect condition, but it still very, very much works. This one I find is a little on the sticky side, and personally my viola loves humidity. It sounds so good on rainy days, just beautiful, rich viola vibes, and I feel like this rosin really helps support that. Now just last year I started using the Bernardel rosin. This one is a little bit powderier. This one is a little bit more powdery, and it looks like it's a darker tone, but I feel like it's not quite as rich as Motria Gold. So I find that this is a little bit too powdery for my viola. It gave it sort of a metallic kind of sound, but it does work really well on my violin. So I only use this for my violin, and I only use the Motria Gold for my viola. Now I do have one viola student who uses this Bernardel rosin on her viola and she loves it, and I have a few students who I've recommended the Motria Gold to for both viola and violin, and they also seem to really like it and it sounds good on their instruments. So a little stickier generally combats drier environments or gives your instrument a richer sound, and a more powdery rosin can kind of cut through a little bit of humidity and give you a crisp, clear tone. Then, of course, an essential accessory is a cleaning cloth. I just use microfiber cleaning cloths. My dad gets them for me at car shows. And, well, I've used this one for 7 or 8 years now. I just throw it in the wash occasionally, only with like dirty beach towels or rugs or things that like are not, you know, my best clothes or sheets or things, because rosin does not mix well with other things. If you've ever stepped on like a sticky base rosin, it will stay stuck to your sock forever until the sock disintegrates. The rosin will not disintegrate, but the sock will. So, you know, just be warned, if you're throwing anything with rosin on it in the washing machine, make sure you're not washing anything really precious or delicate along with it. You're cleaning this, and the rosin might get on other things as well. So when I'm out performing or teaching somewhere, I will wipe my viola down right before I put it in my instrument bag and close my case up. When I'm teaching, I used to be so good about wiping my instruments down at the end of each day. I used to do that in college and grad school. It was wonderful. Now with teaching, I do this basically at the end of every week, where I just wipe the rosin and dirt and dust off of the strings, off of the fingerboard, and off of the wooden body itself. So rosin over time, especially if it's hot and humid like it is here in Richmond, Virginia every single summer, it will kind of melt down and mess up the varnish on your instrument. So definitely wipe things down, and do it even more often over the summer if there's humidity. Anytime there's heat, just be sure that you're not letting the rosin melt and then harden up and create a bad environment. So here's my viola. If you've never seen my viola, here it is, 16 inches. My baby. Anyway, I use an Everest shoulder rest. I bought this shoulder rest, I think 12 years ago when I was in high school. And this is my favorite because it's very, very sturdy. I used to use a Kuhn collapsible shoulder rest. Still have that on my violin just because I haven't gone out to buy any other violin shoulder rests, and this works just fine on the violin. It stays in place for me. But if you're a violist, you know, no viola is ever standard. Violins are so easy. This is a full-size violin. Things made for full-size violins are going to fit on this. You're not gonna have a very hard time. Now violas, you can buy yourself a 16-inch shoulder rest, and it might not fit your 16-inch viola. You might buy yourself a case for a 16-inch viola and it might not fit. Ask me how I know with my BAM case. Also, I wanted to talk about this in the case section. If you do buy a BAM case, or really any case that you buy, be sure to measure your instrument height or length, width, and the depth. Make sure that it's going to fit in whatever case you're looking at buying, especially a BAM case, and especially if you're a violist, because I got a BAM case that I thought was going to fit my viola, did not fit, it was too small, so we had to measure again, and I actually needed a larger size. So even if you have a 16-inch viola, sometimes they can be a little bit wider, or a little bit skinnier, or a little bit deeper than whatever the brand's kind of standard measurement is. So just double check everything, measure twice, buy once. That's about it. But back to my viola shoulder rest. This is an Everest. The feet are nice and grippy, they're rubber. There is next to no metal that you could potentially scratch your viola on. The only metal is the screw for the foot. And you can see, you'd have to take the foot out and scratch it on your viola to scratch your viola. So like, there's nothing scary about this shoulder rest. It is nice and squishy, and even 12 years later, it still has squish to it. I did modify this. In college, I went through a period where I was gaining and losing quite a bit of weight, here and there, a couple times. And so my mom and I put like a little strip of foam on top. We rubber banded it, and then she sewed just this little black fabric on top, so that, because the fabric was green and I just didn't want the green there, and without something protecting the foam, it would kind of just rub around. So this really protected that. You can see a little bit of the foam in there if you look closely. And by now that foam has almost thoroughly squished itself, so it's just barely a bit of extra padding, but for how I am now, that seems to work, and I'm pretty comfortable when I play my viola now. So I highly recommend an Everest shoulder rest. I think that it is so much better than the other generic alternatives, and it's usually offered at about the same price point even. I was looking at listings today. It's, I think, even cheaper than a lot of the others. So I would definitely start with this one and then experiment if it doesn't work for you. All right, since I do work from home and teach from home most of the time, I keep my instruments on instrument stands. This is an Ingles violin / viola instrument stand, and I've been using these for almost 20 years now. I think I got my first one, which is over there, very early on into playing the violin, and I started playing the violin 20 years ago. This year, 20 years ago. So I've probably had that other one for 19 or 20 years. This one is a little bit newer, maybe like 15 years old. And I use this one exclusively for my viola because it has to be set up a little bit higher, and I use my older one set to a little bit of a smaller size just for my violin. These provide a lot of support for your instrument. You can see I am just moving it around and I'm not the steadiest. Of course, the bow moves around a little bit because that's what a bow will do when it's hanging, but my viola is really solidly in place, and it's great to just have my instrument sitting here and I can grab and go when I need to, demonstrate while teaching, do anything that I want. I could not live without an instrument stand. That is one of the best accessories I've ever had for anything ever. Just leaving your instrument out in a safe space, of course. If they're young children or very interested animals in your house and they have free range, then you might not want to leave your instrument out on a stand. But I have a studio that has a door on it, and my cat is not allowed in here unless I'm in here, so I can just leave my viola and my violin out on their stands in here all the time, and just when I come down here I can just grab my instruments and play whenever I want. And that can be a really good practice tip if you find that it's difficult for you to actually pick up your instrument and get started. If you can get a music stand and you feel comfortable leaving it out, that just takes down one of the hardest barriers, which is the first one, which is getting your instrument out in the first place. My last accessory and kind of piece of gear that I use for my string instruments is a dampit. I only use this during the dry, cold months when my instruments need a little bit of humidity. Admittedly, I don't use this very much anymore because this is only really helpful if your instrument is inside the case and the case is closed, because this is relatively small and it's not going to provide a ton of humidity. If you're leaving your instrument out all the time like I am, it's way more helpful to have an actual humidifier that you set up in your room. I have a whole video on humidity and how you should treat your string instruments depending on high humidity versus low humidity. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely watch that. Be very careful putting humidifiers close to your string instruments because you do not want the actual water to get onto or into your instruments. You do have to be very careful with a dampit because of that. So when I use it, I just run it under the sink until it's squishy. It's just a little sponge in there. And then I take a towel and I kind of scrunch it out a bit so that it feels damp, but there's not water dripping out of it. And then you just gently feed it through one of the F-holes. I've even seen some people take 2 of these. I just only own 1. This is a lot harder to do on camera with your non-dominant hand, so sorry about that. And then it just sits in there and it provides humidity for your instrument. Some people will play with these in. It can make sort of a weird like dampening or vibrated sound, but if you're in a small room that's very, very dry, like a practice room or some sort of venue where you can't control the humidity of the actual space, then this can help even just a little bit. All right, those are some of my favorite things that I use for my viola and my violin. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you found some inspiration of maybe something that you've been looking for or some good recommendations. If you're on the hunt for some rosin, I hope you found something that might work for you. If you have any accessories that you can't live without, please let me know down in the comments or over in the comments on my blog where everything will be listed. If you found this video helpful, please like and consider subscribing. I post new videos every Sunday at noon Eastern time, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.